Okay, excellent. We're recording now. That way, anyone that couldn't attend this, that was registered, or for those of you who are attending this, that want to go back and review the information that we talk about today, that's going to be really foundational and powerful for you to come back to throughout the year. These are very common measurements, very common strengths that we're going to be talking about today that we've found over the last 17 years with over 100,000 people that have worked with us to hone in these measurements, these impacts, the way that they're showing up in people's lives. It's given us a lot of information around that. Now, before we dive into the information, which we're going to here in just a second, we want to spend the majority of this webinar talking about things that you can use, things that you can take in and examine in your own life and put into, practical improvement in your business and your relationships. I want to talk a little bit about who this information is for. I think that's only fair to make sure that it's really clear right up front for those of you attending this to know whether it's for you or not. Now, it's a really simple qualification as to whether this information and what we do is for you or not, and that is that you're an intentional creator. Those are the people that we work with. Those are the people we create results with. Those are the people that we serve, are intentional creators. Now, there are typically two types of intentional creators. There are those who are up to big things, engaged in life, making things happen, and they want to be able to do that better and faster and more efficiently. Then there are the intentional creators that have a sense of a calling. Mandino called it that irritation to their soul to be more than who they are, and they just haven't been able to figure it out yet. Or they haven't cracked the code of themselves, but they know that they were born for a bigger footprint in this world, to add value and contribute to this world. So those are the two audiences that we have really focused on over the last 17 years. Over 100,000 intentional creators we've worked with at a very deep level. Everything we're going to talk about today comes from the proprietary technology that we've developed that allows us to marry science and intuition in a really powerful way. Now, this webinar isn't about that tool. It's about what we've discovered from that tool. So hopefully most of you have already taken a habitfinder.com or Habit Finder profile at habitfinder.com. If you haven't, you're going to want to do so after this presentation so that you can stay present and be here with us, and then come back to the recording and review it again with your Habit Finder profile intact, because that's going to show you the measurements that are playing off of each other and the three strengths and the measurements that are playing off of those that we're going to be talking about today. Now, these three strengths are the three most common, amazing strengths that are unique to intentional creators, that are unique to the audience that we have been serving at a very high level for over 17 years. These are, by far and away, I mean, there isn't even a close fourth, the three most common things that are awesome. We want to make sure that's clear, right, Dad? I mean, today we want to make sure that they know these are great. We don't want to strike fear into anybody about these gifts that they really are. We want to make sure that the mindset is that these are awesome. These are amazing. But as with any great power, great strength, great opportunity, there can be tremendous risk to balance that out that we'll want to be aware of. Like you can see the freeway back here behind me out of my office. People are driving 70 miles an hour in 4,000 or 5,000 pound hunks of metal out there. Now that's an amazing convenience. It allows me to get to work a lot quicker than I would have been able to 100 years ago. But there's tremendous risk in driving on that freeway. In fact, I watched someone ram into the back of someone else on my way to work today. That was a perfect example as my heart kind of went, oh, someone just on their phone a little too much on the freeway, which too much would be at all. And the risk manifested in a negative way. We want you to have the awareness in 2018 and beyond of these amazing gifts so that you don't kind of ram into the back of your own progress focused on the wrong things. Or even more so, not just the wrong things, the things that aren't as impactful to your progress. Because some of them can be counterintuitive. And with that, we're going to roll right into the first one. The first strength that can blow our life apart, can destroy our income or our potential, is going to be the amazing gift of vivid visionary. And Dad, we probably spend more time talking to people about this one than just about any other one. So I'm going to hand things over to you to take everybody through the masterclass of vivid visionaries. So with that, it's all yours.
I loved your example of the freeway. I often call this one the fully charged fire hose, without a fireman hanging onto the end of it.
Yeah.
And what we want to do is find out how powerful it is, walk out onto the end and hold it and direct it into very specific directions. Because if you do it this way, you will get inspired ideas, intuitive impressions, creative solutions. And if we have you wired to a functional MRI, we would see parts of your brain ignite that are normally dormant in a human being. It ignites passion. And the passion will drive our actions. We'll do whatever it takes to create what has come to our mind if we're using it constructively. Now, before we jump into this, just a couple of things. One, when you're looking at a measurement in your habit finder profile, you are always the green in the measurement, the center. And it's in the center for a reason. We're centered, we're grounded. The book I wrote, The Observer's Chair, I'm sitting in the observer's chair, in control of my life. This is when we're conscious and awake and alert. We also have some habits of thinking that want to pull us off of center, and this is one of those areas. Now, if it pulls us off center and we're using it correctly, extremely powerful. If it pulls us off center and we're not hanging on to it, we're not managing it, it will very literally blow your life apart. So that's the first thing. Two, when we talk about vivid visionary, when we measure someone's habits of thinking, we're often measuring a habit for which they're not totally aware. This is really a key piece for you. When we can reveal it, we are not creating it. It's a key piece. If we're unconscious and it's destroying our life, would we not want to know about it? Well, sometimes there are those who are not intentional creators who would just as soon put their head in the sand and just go through life. And it continually blows apart their life. For an intentional creator, it's like, please share with me. So as we start to talk about vivid visionary, what I want you to think about, and this is going to be an exercise you'll do for the balance of the day, I want you to practice a concept called interrupt. That means you're driving along the car. Boom, interrupt. Where is my mind? Where's my mind? Oh my goodness. Interrupt a little while later. Where is my mind? And just start taking mental notes. How often am I thinking about things that are positive? How often am I thinking about things that are fantastical, wonderful things? How often am I thinking about really negative, awful things? And again, we're not creating this challenge. We're simply revealing it. It's time, if you want to be an intentional creator, to become totally aware of where this specific thought process is going. I wrote in a book, 4 years, 4 a.m. in the morning till 8 a.m. in the morning. 4 years on this very topic because of a man who was crying in our first coaching session, Dave, I can almost touch it. I can almost taste it. Why can't I have it? What's wrong with me? And then he punctuated with this, does God not love me? Well, I could tell immediately from his assessment, he had this enormous gift to vividly visualize. He was choosing to use it destructively. Now, as I shared it with him, he became increasingly aware of how destructive it was. However, here was the key. He was using it the way he'd been taught to use it. And it was destroying his life. So as we go into vivid visionary, one of the things we'll want to do is the interrupt so we know where our mind is going. And don't be disappointed or discouraged when you discover, wow, I was spending a lot of time, in the Caribbean scuba diving in my mind. Or I was spending a lot of time playing out worst case scenarios and I'm homeless by the time I get to work every morning. Or my marriage is blown apart, or my kids don't love me anymore, whatever it might be. Or somebody pulled in front of me on the freeway, using Paul's example, and I discover that in my mind, I'm following them off the exit into the parking lot, pulling them out of the car and beating the crap out of them. That's where my mind went. It just kept going and going and going. Unchecked, it is obsessive and visual. Now, lastly, some say, well, I'm not a vivid visionary. Well, anytime you're somewhere else in your mind, that's vivid visionary. Anywhere than here. If you're thinking about a party you're going to go to, or a client that you're going to see, or a situation at home, or one of your children's got you frustrated and you're processing, that's vivid visionary. We want to get in touch with the fact that we are seeing something. And with the thought process shared by 97% of intentional creators, we'll show it to you in a moment. We go right into the example in the assessment. 97%. That we're finding that those people often don't think they're vivid visionaries. Then they begin to realize they are vividly visualizing. And because of the magnitude of the measurement, it is so powerful. It's gone from green to yellow to orange and often red to way over there in vivid visionary, over there to fantastical, way over there, that the brain is actually creating a new reality. Yeah, a new reality. It's so real to the mind because of the magnitude of the visualization. It's so real to the mind that has created what the neuroscientists call a mental construct. It's constructed a new mental reality. And it's so real that the body reacts to it. So if it's really negative and self-sabotaging, the body's releasing cortisol. Fear dendrites from the amygdala, your fight or flight center, shutting down your prefrontal cortex, your empathy, practical judgment, common sense, rendering you emotionally paralyzed. You'll find yourself in the dark dungeon of despair and discouragement. And those molecules, hormones, released in the body, the fear dendrites in the brain, are false evidence. It's not happening. It's just in our mind. We might be driving down the freeway. That's what's happening. This is just happening in our mind, but it's so real that this false evidence, this feeling, anxious feeling, this impairment of our brain, this false evidence appears very real. It's a new mental construct. False evidence appearing real, unknown author. The acronym for fear. Fear is an acronym. So you want to be very careful as you're learning about this piece, and we become increasingly aware. We'll want to learn how to use it constructively, how to hold the fire hose and point it to get those inspired ideas, to ignite our passion and drive our action. That's what it's designed to do. Now we see two very common scenarios among intentional creators. Number one, we go into the future to envision what it's going to be like. We're going to create this, right? Now, there's one intentional creator who's going to come back here to the now, excited by this possibility, and each day they're going to ask the question, what can I do to move this forward 1 millimeter? And they get a vision of what they can do, and that in turn ignites their passion. And they pick 2 or 3 things they'll want to do that day. Then they're mentally rehearsing, they're preparing for it, getting inspired ideas and executing those moments. And at the end of the day, they're celebrating the movement of a millimeter. You feel that? Next morning they get up, they remember this. Then what can I do today? It can be redundant, so bear with me. This is so critical. What can I do today to move this 1 millimeter? Ooh, I get excited about that. I identify the things I'm going to do. I execute those. I create, I celebrate. I create, I create, I celebrate. I create, I celebrate. Can you see what happens? Eventually, they're actually intangible reality living their dream. There has been a belief, I'd like to call it a lie if you're okay, that you're supposed to go into the future and not just visualize what you want to create, but start playing with what it's going to be like after it's created. Can you feel that? Because when you go into that space, remember, mental construct, creating a new reality, an expectation. Etymologically, that means concrete condition for happiness. You're creating concrete conditions for happiness. You haven't even created the objective, and you're already creating what's going to happen after that. Now what happens? Instead of being here with millimeters, creation, life shows up differently than this, because we didn't want to come back and create it. We just wanted it to be manifest. You've heard that word. Dreams are not magically manifest. We get them, they ignite our passion, we create by millimeter, and the more we stay focused here, the faster it happens. The universe shows up, puts people on our path who can serve us and who we can serve, and we get to the fastest possible creative process. The fastest possible. However, there are some who want to be intentional creators who have been misguided in believing you visualize, and then you visualize what it would be like after, not knowing that they're creating a new mental construct. They've got norepinephrine coursing through their sympathetic nervous system. That's a very powerful drug. It's like morphine. Very euphoric drug. The instant life shows up differently. The body, remember I said the body reacts? The body shows up to protect that mental construct. It's going to release massive doses of cortisol. That's the antithesis. It's the total opposite of norepinephrine. Norepinephrine, cortisol. They're not two further pieces apart in terms of hormones. So all of a sudden you've got anxiety. Your prefrontal cortex is shut down. You're feeling impaired and you're hating life because there's nothing about tangible reality that's even coming close to where your mind has been. Can you feel this? And so you go into the other side, which is the catastrophe, the fear, the doubt, beating yourself up. This is a cascading effect. That's why this thought process can blow your life apart. Not just because you can go into fantasy. It's what fantasy does to your body, what your body does to your mindset regarding your own worth, and the number one cause of self-deprecating, self-sabotaging internal dialogue about your own worth and worthiness, ability, character, beliefs, contribution. The number one cause of challenges is an unmet expectation, a concrete condition for happiness. Well, Paul, let's show them this part of the assessment. This is called My Dreams. If we could scroll down just a little bit so you can see it. My Dreams. These habits impact finding, getting clear, and having the motivation to create my dreams. So you scroll back down again, I'm sorry. These 6 measurements. Oh, I wish we had time to go into each one. We don't. Self-directed, acting on my own moral authority, doing the next right thing for the right reason because I want to, get to, choose to. That's your green. Far too many are over here in obligation. We've got somebody here in perfection. No matter what I do, it's never good enough. Unrelenting, unyielding, pursuit of the unachievable. That's why we want to get them back into excellence. But it's the intentional measurement. That's the one you want to look at in your assessment. And Paul's going to talk about another one in a few moments called analytical, because that's an obsessive thinking. This is obsessive thinking that's visual. So it could be coming from either one of them, but this is the primary source. If you have this one, green, you want to learn how to use it constructively. Yellow, orange, red, even more imperative that you do, because if you don't, you're at a high risk, a natural tendency, negative tendency, a proclivity. That's the definition of a proclivity, a natural negative tendency to engage in fantasy. And fantasy is this high emotional high, low emotional low, high emotional high, low emotional low. Or you might do as if so many have. They go to worst case scenarios first, and the only joy they experience is when it doesn't turn out as bad as they had feared. A really sad source of joy. So take a look at this measurement and ask yourself, how often, and if you're not aware, remember the interrupt, just do the interrupt. Ooh, where am I? What am I thinking about? Am I in fantasy? Am I escaping into the future and imagining what it'll be like after all my problems are solved and I've got lots of money in the bank? Or am I in catastrophe, playing out worst case scenarios? How am I feeling? How's this impacting my mindset for the day? And what would be different if you knew how to use 5 constructive ways, use this gift, 5 constructive ways to get an inspired idea, an intuitive impression, a creative solution. That's a visual image that ignites your brain, ignites your passion, drives your action, working without counting the cost or tracking the time. If you've got this measurement, you know what this feels like. You've had moments of it. What would it be like if you did it more intentionally? Because I want you to see what happens with this measurement. Just scroll down if you would, Paul. Down to joy. See that joy measurement? You want to check this one. We call this the UGG measurement. Ugh. Life keeps showing up differently than it robs you of joy, robs you. And when it's robbing you, the last thing we're going to talk about, you'll see the final devastation and how it impacts one of your greatest gifts. And the grateful measurement just makes us terribly impatient. We want linear time to speed up and everyone in it to run at that speed. We don't have time for tick, tick, tick. Our mind has already seen it. We're already there. Well, what would it be like if you learned how to live here, taking your clay, creating the most you can with it, with a vision, create, celebrate, create, celebrate, create, celebrate, and in time, actually live your dreams. That's our objective. So take a look at this measurement. See how it's been treating you and whether it would serve you to manage it. So Paul, there's the first one.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So a couple of things. And by the way, the Q&A should be open, should be available. And I believe the chat is even open, whichever one you prefer. If you have any questions about this particular strength, about vivid visionary, a few things that I would love to emphasize while people get a chance to type in any questions they've got, is we started this session off in talking about we don't want to create a fear around vivid visionary, like dream boards and visualization and law of attraction. I mean, they're all powerful, wonderful principles when harnessed appropriately. And if we could distill your gut check, your fork in the road, down to 2 things, it would be the moment that you want to go there. And the challenge is that you're probably going there without even realizing that you are. The risk of talking about any of this today, any of these 3 strengths, is I'm sure you've heard the term easier said than done. Well, here we're way underneath the surface of doing. We're so much deeper than motivation and personality and behavior. We're getting into the guts of your thinking habits. And that's why we always say it's easier said than become. Because, I mean, it's a process. It is a dedication, a training, a learning new habits is not easily done. And when we're diving into this space to retrain your intuition, retrain with scientifically proven techniques to create counter moves to some of these risks, to be able to create a more conscious awareness. Everyone talks about awareness, but we're talking about like awareness in the moment. I can be aware when I'm in this webinar. I can be aware when I'm reading the book, but awareness in the moment. And one of the keys to that awareness we were talking about, distilling it down, is why you're going there. That's what you want to start to marinate in. Are you going there because life's frustrating, because life's, pardon the expression, pissing you off, or it's not showing up the way you want? even if you're trying to be optimistic and enthusiastic about it, if you're going there to escape, this gift will get the best of you every time. And as my dad was talking about beautifully in even the short amount of time we've got today, you want to go there to engage, and you're going to know you did. Remember what he said, because you're going to come back from that place with millimeters rather than grand ideas that are just going to frustrate the process. Grand ideas are awesome. Dreams are so good. We don't want to avoid any of those things. We're talking about ways to harness those.
Yes.
So.
And turn our dream boards into targets.
Yeah, right?
Not in daily mental destinations.
I was thinking about that this morning, Dad. I was thinking about how, you and I are huge sports fans. You were a collegiate football player, a consummate Rudy. Okay, I'm not. I know you talk about all the time, 5 foot nothing, 100 nothing, but people knew when you ran into them. You also knew too, because your body couldn't do it anymore after college.
I wasn't very big, but I was slow. Was that?
Love it. I was thinking about the Hall of Fame this morning, and the athletes that get into the Hall of Fame, not just in the NFL, but any sport. And one of the challenges that we're seeing more and more today, especially with social media and the awareness of where people are at, are players that play for contracts. You can tell when they're in a contract year that they could get paid the next year, because suddenly the work ethic changes and suddenly the effort on the field, the extra intangibles start changing. Man, we know those aren't the people that get into the Hall of Fame. They weren't the players that were chasing contracts. They weren't the players that were doing this for the money. They certainly don't mind the money, but the ones that were doing it for the money, the ones that were doing it for the contracts, they didn't get to the Hall of Fame, and as statistics have shown, their life fall apart after the money goes away. That's what I think of with this measurement, Dad. I think of, are we living our lives chasing contracts? Are we living our lives chasing money? And I love how you put it, because money is always going to run faster than you. Or are we living for the targets? Are we living for our personal best, the generosity of totally unleashing our gifts on the world to serve and add value rather than some destination we want to get to? So anyway, I don't want to belabor the point, as it was beautiful laid out. Looks like we don't have any Q&A at the moment on this. And we'll have some time at the end if there is any questions that popped up for people. Let's roll into the next one. As my dad alluded to, it's going to be down here in the section of structure. Okay. This is the thought processes that impact your willingness to embrace structure, that on an intellectual level, every one of us know is critical to our success. Okay, Peter Drucker, the father of business management and leadership, said that if you can't measure it, you can't improve it, and that structure and management is so important. But there are some very particular thought processes that intentional creators have in the vast majority in a very strong way. Now, a few of them in here that we don't have time to talk about are one of the ones you see here, are resistance to structure, in that discipline measurement right there. Entrepreneurs, we don't like to be in the box. We don't like imposed structure, especially. Oh man, if we have a great idea and we grab onto it, game over. But if someone comes and tells us about that same idea and that we have to do it, then it just falls apart. And then respectful. It's not that we are disrespectful. If any of you have this measurement moving to the left, it doesn't mean you're disrespectful. It likely means you've had some bad experiences with people in positions of authority that have tried to control you. And they weren't necessarily the most competent people to be the ones in the position to do that. And that can create some turbulence, some interference when we have other people in perceived positions of authority in our life, whether spiritually or professionally or whatever the case is, where it might take a little while for us to be okay with their guidance, because we're really looking to put them through a gauntlet of, can this person really add value to my life? Because we've got a skewed perspective from some bad experience with authority in the past. But the one I want to focus on today, which is our second strength that we've got, just as powerful as vivid visionary, is this analytical measurement when it moves to the right. Similar to vivid visionary, we're never going to want to compress that. We're never going to want to see an assessment that was orange or red vivid visionary or orange or red obsessive and suddenly it shows up balanced, because this is an amazing gift. But similar to vivid visionary, this is a bowl in a china shop. This can be a fire hose just spraying everywhere. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the pieces of awareness similar to Vivid Visionary to allow you to harness this, to be able to point in the right direction. Now, the reason it says obsessive is we're talking about obsessive thinking. Okay, we're talking about effortless thinking would probably be another great way to put this. Effortless thinking is a gift that is present in 97% of intentional creators. People with an entrepreneurial mind. That isn't necessarily you're an entrepreneur by vocation. We always focus more on mindset than actual vocation. We coach and train and work with tons of entrepreneurs who work for someone else because it's the mindset. And 97% obsessively think. And so if you're looking at your habit finder profile and your analytical is starting to move over to the right, or it's pinned over there, redlined, that's awesome. That means you have a naturally active and likely very brilliant mind. It's one of the things, it's why it's called an entrepreneurial measurement, because one of the driving forces of becoming an entrepreneur is because we think about everything. And we want to constantly think about ways to make it better and to improve it. And why we usually become entrepreneurs is because we get frustrated with bureaucracy and other challenges and lack of control to be able to do that in a company we work for. I've been fortunate enough to be an entrepreneur for most of my life, but there's been many years I've worked for other people and really fortunate to work in an entrepreneurial capacity where I had autonomy to be able to bring my very obsessive mind to the table to work on this. So please understand this awesome gift. Now, some of you might get frustrated that have this gift and you wake up in the middle of the night and if you're not really careful and that engine gets revved up in your mind, you're not going back to bed because your brain is just, it's just off to the races. You know, it's almost like we got to sneak around it if we need to get up at night for a drink of water or use the restroom because this obsessive thinking. And so one question I want everyone to consider is, what do you do to quiet your mind? That's one of the first things we're going to want to do to make sure that this driving force of our mind doesn't drive us and everyone around us crazy. Are you finding opportunities to quiet your mind? Now, in today's society, you're going to want to be really careful of the difference between unplugging your mind and quieting your mind. Because we've worked with a lot of people who have substituted quieting their mind with things that are actually just unplugging it. Like watching television, or even for some people, reading can be a way to unplug and just check out. So this is not a discussion about that being bad, okay? Unplugging is necessary. We're human. Getting an opportunity to just, get away from it is not a bad thing. But what we're talking about here is quieting your mind. Some really common things are meditation. And I would challenge any of you out there who may be similar to me that were like, meditation, schmeditation. It's because you may have had a stereotypical consideration of what meditation is. Now, transcendental and yogi type of mentality and meditation, awesome. I've studied a lot of those and they're powerful, but I found my own version of meditation. I highly recommend that any of you obsessive thinkers do the same so we can start to quiet our mind. You'll still have the opportunity to unplug, but you're going to spend so much of your day with such an active mind forcing it to go where you need it to go. Find some time to just let it run free and watch the volume turn down a little bit. Even just for a few minutes can make a huge impact on the rest of your day. So be sure after and beyond this webinar, you're considering how you're quieting your mind. And is there any chance you've been unplugging it instead of quieting it? And what would be different in your life if you started to learn to do both? Okay, let's talk about the two primary risks other than just the general challenge of having a mind that never stops, okay? And the first risk is that because we can think so obsessively, it gets deep. It's a molecular reaction that we get attached to our ideas. This section in your habit finder profile is called a systemic section. Systemic values mathematically are all or nothing. It's a singular concept. It can't have a gray area. It's singular, all or nothing, win or lose, right or wrong. And so now we know when we're in this space of our mind, we're on a monorail, we're on a train, okay? And trains are not known for their agility or their ability to stop very fast, okay? And so as we consider this, when we're getting attached to an idea and we've we've explored it and we can consider things quickly, we can problem solve really fast, we can see all this stuff, the risk we run of getting into this all or nothing mentality is needing to be right. What's interesting about this piece is that it's not like an entitlement. Okay, it's not like an adolescent, I need to be right. Like I ask people, do you feel like you have a challenge with needing to be right? And that might be the consideration in terms of some kind of immaturity for entitlement. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a need, like a need for water when you're dehydrated, or a need for food when you're hungry and your body's been starved. That's the kind of need that's happening on a really deep level with these systemic thoughts, because you have seen it. You have seen that if they would just come over here and look at this from the angle I'm looking, yeah, I know what you mean. I get it. But, right? I mean, how many of us have come there? I get what you mean, but if you would just come over here, you would see that I'm right. But it's not about being right. It's about that they just need to see it as clearly as you do. The challenge is that there can be some noise or interference in other areas, other cascading areas of your assessment that are actually skewing that view, or at least skewing the way the view is being communicated. And our need to be right, this right, wrong, win, lose, can create some major challenges, and we can crush other people. Because just as deep as we've become connected to these ideas, we know that the majority of the people you're working with are as connected to their own ideas, and the nervous system of their ideas goes directly into their self-worth. So when you're focused on making sure they see that your idea is the right one, they may be over there feeling like their self-worth or their character or their integrity is being challenged. Even though in your mind, this is a discussion about the idea, that's not what they're feeling. And systemic thoughts are not known for their feelings. Okay? So you're going to want to be really aware of when we get caught up in these ideas and need to be right. These are the times with our spouse, for me personally, where I got into an argument where once the dust settled, I'm sitting there going, man, why did I get so caught up in that? All we were doing was talking about where to go to dinner tonight, and you would have thought it was World War III. And it's almost embarrassing to think, but that's how powerful our attachment to these ideas are. It's almost like we suddenly, like out-of-body experience, and we're watching ourselves argue with this other person and going, wow, we're really caught up in this. Because it's almost an autopilot that can take over. For many of us that have this gift, again, it is a gift. This shadow side is something to be really aware of and learn to manage at a high level, because it's so worth it to learn to manage it because of all the upside of this wonderful gift. The upside of problem solving, the upside of exploration, the upside of common sense, okay? Just an amazing opportunity here. The second risk, as I just mentioned, common sense, is that your common sense is not so common. That's something you're going to want to understand, because it's a tremendous risk to believe that everyone else is thinking as thoroughly about things as you are. It's a tremendous risk to believe that what seems as obvious as the nose on your face is as obvious as the nose on theirs, because that's where we can create some dissonance. That's where we may have been assuming we were more clear about our objectives than we thought we were, because we had already put it all together in our mind. But one of the risks we run is assuming a little too much about what this gift allows us to do, and whether it can be reciprocated clearly to another person who comes back from a project you asked them to focus on, or some steps you asked them to take, and they didn't do it the way you would have. Or more than likely, they didn't do it as clearly as you expected, or as thoroughly thought out in the project. And that can be really frustrating. I mean, how many of you get frustrated by people who don't have what you would call common sense? Like, really? Come on, like that kind of reaction? Well, let's back it off a little bit and understand that this gift in certain areas of our life has put us ahead of the curve, but that doesn't mean we get to walk around assuming that they are already there. And just because they didn't have common sense in our interaction doesn't mean they don't have it. They have tremendous capacity, but remember, we've become a railroading monorail, a train, and we may have handicapped their capacity because of how attached we were to our ideas. And we can start to see how these risks play off of each other. This amazing gift, this amazingly active mind that has contributed so many inventions and innovations and amazing opportunities to this world. We don't want to suppress this, but we want to understand that this incredible strength has come with some challenging dark sides, okay? We want to understand that when people didn't show up with as much common sense as we thought, that we want to seek more intentional insight and instruction rather than the natural frustration that comes because of this all or nothing, win or lose train that we were on. Last piece about this. Other than the fact that we're actually like practically more molecularly connected to these ideas, here's why it's been so hard for us to be able to capitalize on this awareness, why it continues to get our goat for a lot of us, and this is a perfect transition into the third strength that Dave's going to cover, is because we care. Because we have really good intentions. And our intentions, I'm sorry to say, are really crappy communicators. If my daughter would just understand that I'm correcting this problem because I love her, she'd be responding to me differently. Why does she make me the bad guy? Why do my coworkers make me the bad guy? Why do they misunderstand me? I wish they would understand why I was doing that, or why I was sharing this, or why I asked them to do that. And it's oftentimes because our intentions are a natural cloak to guard from being able to be more acutely aware of the risks involved in this very active, very high octane gift that we have. So just give yourself a little grace that it's because you have good intentions that it's kind of working against you a little bit. But we're gonna be able to reprogram this without suppressing the gift, but to be able to allow it to flourish. And when you learn how to harness this gift, you allow others around you to surprise you and to flourish as well. Because our intentions and these risks were suppressing their gifts without us realizing it. Why? Because we were in that all or nothing, win-lose mentality that can't often make room for another person, but only a singular tunnel-visioned objective. We want to be really careful with that because, again, the upside of all this is absolutely worth the very diligent, consistent, never-ending work to be able to harness this amazing gift of obsessive and effortless thinking. Okay?
Thank you, Paul. Can I add just a piece?
Please, and then we've got a couple questions look like they've been coming through, so go ahead.
Why don't you go ahead and read that one from Karen. We have vivid visionary, which blows apart our life. When we need to be right, as Paul so aptly stated, right, wrong, win, lose, life, death, all, nothing, we need to be right. The only other option for the person is to be wrong. And then since their idea is attached to their self-esteem, we crush their self-esteem. This would actually blows apart the life of others. And if we can learn how to manage this, as Paul said, it is so powerful because effortlessly think and solve problems, your mind won't stop till they're solved. But you'll also be able to stop back, be conscious, and find the good in another person's idea. When someone comes to report, instead of saying, well, did you think about this? Did you think about that? Where someone's going, oh, I feel like an idiot. We have a process to work through and validate that person instead of being stuck in right, wrong, win, lose. The truth is, corporate America, for the most part, lives in this world. And there are actually 3 levels of mathematics: systemic, right, wrong math, extrinsic, common sense, practical judgment, intrinsic math, the value of the human being. We have corporate America turned upside down. Right, wrong, win, lose systems, people at the bottom. People are the greatest asset, the greatest asset. When we care about the people, we can manage this one better. It's the single hardest thought process to manage. Because as Paul said, we feel it in the fibers of our being. Incredible. Paul, would you go to this assessment and go to self-esteem for a moment?
Absolutely. One quick note on Karen's question.
Yes.
Because I've got a feeling this is going to benefit a lot of people that are on here. There's a lot of things that we want to focus on. In fact, a whole area of our coaching that's just on learning to be more present and learning, not so you can turn into someone that you're not. That's one thing you want to understand is, for example, I'm not a sit down and read a book in silence kind of person, but I've found ways to be more present and absorb books through a few different kind of hacks, if you will, to my own thought processes. And so that's the first thing, Karen, is don't try to turn yourself into something you're not. But I'm actually going to borrow from something I heard my dad share with someone that I absolutely loved when they were talking about the need to continually refocus. They were asking, well, what happens if my mind wants to take me off course? In this particular case, it was when I'm reading the scrolls. And I'm sitting here like, ooh, this is a good one. I want to hear what my dad has to say. And he said, follow it. I was like, what? Like, you don't like lasso it and pull it back in? Because that's what I do. I have entrepreneurial ADD, as a lot of us do, from this obsessive thinking that we're talking about. But he said, follow it. And I suddenly became so aware of the times in my life that I was being suppressed or handicapped because I was fighting where my mind wanted to go. And it was amazing as I gave myself permission to follow it, that oftentimes it was short-lived, or if it wasn't, I'm really glad I followed it. Because one of my best friends in listening to scrolls, listening to books on Audible, watching webinars is a pause button, okay? And that's why we're recording this for all of you. We understand that. So Karen and anyone else, if you find yourself, your mind trying to take you places, first, stop fighting it and follow it to relieve the pressure of trying to pretend it's not there. And then if it tries to take you someplace that's not productive, then make a conscious choice. Okay, I gave you a shot. I followed you, brain, but now I've got to get back on task. Doing those things more consciously makes a massive difference in the awareness of our own thoughts and our own to-dos and the things you're talking about, Karen. I think that'll help a lot of people on here. So, and then we've got a couple other Q&As. Let's see here, just one second. Tanya asked, if respectful is read to the left, would that also be a result of lack of trust? You want to take that one, Dad?
Certainly. Entrepreneurial independent thinkers, Paul alluded to this, they do not value title or position. They value competency and contribution. Now, if you're in a situation where you're working for or with, and excuse the common vernacular, but may I use it, an idiot, it's really hard to give up your power and follow someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. So when you say it's red, the first question I have, Tanya, is, have you ever had a job? Have you ever worked for somebody who didn't know what they're doing? And 3, did you ever say something? Because at red, it's really hard to go from bite my tongue, it's bleeding, and not speak. And if you've spoken, what kind of challenge does it create for you? Because most people are not very responsive to that kind of feedback. Now, I would ask you to do this. Go back into your life and just say, was I ever in a situation, I'm just closing my eyes as I'm going there with you, was I ever in a situation where someone was controlling my life? I did not have control. And when I finally broke free, I said, I will never allow anyone to ever do that again. If you can feel that, you may have found the source. Because when it gets to red, the risk is we might throw the baby out with the bathwater. We might be so resistant to having someone tell us that we might actually miss an opportunity to hear someone who really is sharing something for our own best interest. They may not be the best communicator. They may not tell it the way we'd like to hear it, but what they're saying can be of value to us if we're willing to listen. So just pay attention. Gosh, was it a father? Was it an ex-husband? Was it a current relationship? What is causing this fight for this fierce independence? See if you can identify it.
Thank you. And then Bob asked a great question, and also had a note to you, Dave, that I copied and pasted to make sure that we can follow up afterwards.
Okay.
You said, how do I shift self-directed since I'm red to the left on obligation? I'm being really courageously transparent, said I'm 75 out of money and can't get the motivation, excitement when I was 30, launching a tremendous career. Couple of things, Bob. One is self-directed when it's red and obligation, that particular measurement I compare to a radio dial, that when it can easily get bumped and be off into the static rather than dialed into the right radio station. It's not a tremendously hard measurement to shift. It's one that's hard to keep shifted, to continue to come back to, because it can be so easily pulled either direction into obligation or into making sure it looks like we're okay, regardless of what's going on under the surface and the risk of appearances, etc. But this is really a tape recorder or mantra going on in your head of I have tos and I musts and I shoulds. And the first thing you can do is start to become aware of those. Hey, Bob, what are you doing next week? Oh, I have to, whatever. Oh, wow, I just heard myself do that. And then change it to I want tos and I get tos. And that kind of commitment. The last thing I'll share, because this is, as with a lot of the things we're talking about today, Bob and everyone else, these are easier said than become, like we're talking about. These are very difficult, deeply rooted challenges. And as you shared with us, and summed it up in one sentence, you've got a lot of layers that are trying to hold you down in terms of stories that you've bought into. And one of the first prerequisites for you to start pulling those layers back and find the consistency and ultimately the equanimity. And equanimity is not some destination you're looking for. That peace of mind that we wrote a book about, the peace of mind is not something that we're looking to arrive at. It is a state of being. It's why Og said in the 10 Scrolls that these are to prevent failure, because what's success other than a state of mind? And so the first thing you're going to want to do as a prerequisite is totally embrace the true order of commitment. The true order of commitment. Most of the world commits to things like this. I feel this way about it, so I'm going to do this based on my feelings, and then I'm going to make a commitment depending on how those actions turn out. That's not commitment. And although intellectually we may believe we're not doing that, it's a natural way that we work. It's why Og said it's so hard to force our actions to control our thoughts. One of the greatest secrets of success, rather than continually letting our thoughts control our actions, because our thoughts and our feelings dictate the actions, and then we assess our commitment level based on that. The true order of commitment is for you to make a very clear and conscious and written down, said out loud frequently commitment to how you want to live today and from here on out. And then your actions, here's where it gets hard. Your actions are going to reflect your commitment, not your feelings. Because the feelings you're facing, 75, out of money, lack of motivation, many of us are in those situations with slightly different demographics and challenges in our life. The feelings are being fueled. The fire's hot of pulling us into this obligation and these challenges. And if we don't accept the fact that it's a counterintuitive, tough row from here, commitment, actions, oftentimes in spite of the feelings, Bob. And if you can stay in that space long enough and for the right reasons, and that's where it gets easier said than become, then the feeling you really are looking for shows up. And so many of us are believing that we're rising above our feelings. It's not happening for many of us. How many of us are unconsciously, I don't feel like it. Now it shows up intellectually as a justification or rationalization or a fear or a number of other things. But to be able to start pulling back these layers, that's the direction you want to consider. And for any of you that are feeling stuck. Because the more stuck we become, and we don't have time to go into this section today in joy, but the more our mind, these cascading habits of thinking convince us that it's because of our surroundings that we're stuck. And until our surroundings change, we're never going to not feel stuck. And until we have some kind of lucky break or something finally happens for us, come on, universe, give me a break, then I'll feel better. It doesn't work that way. It's a vicious paradox that we try to dig ourselves out of a hole. You think about that. So, okay? All right. Feel, act, think, a fathead. That's awesome. Love that. All
Well,
right.
I see in pictures. First of all, my heart went out. So thank you for sharing. Well, I was just envisioning someone snorkeling. Forgive me, but snorkeling in the manure of life with a backpack full of bricks strapped on them, and they can't figure out why they can't float to the surface. Consciously taking off have to, should, must, need to, and consciously I want to, I get to, I choose to. Scroll 9, I will command, and I will obey my own command. I will act now. Just freeing yourself of the rocks will help you float to the surface. So that'll help create some of that mindset. So consciously hear it, consciously shift it. David Hawkins wrote a book. You might want to go pick it up. It's called Power versus Force. And the conversations around powerful words and forceful words, have to, should, must, need to, actually impact our strength in our body. Want to, get to, choose to actually give us energy. So feel that in your life. Want to, get to, choose to. And at 75, the only thing I want to add, do you know how many 75-year-olds are feeling this way? And they need a champion. So why don't you be their champion? Okay. Paul, take us to self-esteem.
Okay, last one.
Remember Paul said, right, wrong, win, lose. You're right, they're wrong. We crush self-esteem. Well, in this case, you also know what it feels like when someone needs to be right, they make you wrong. If you happen to be this person, we would know what buttons got pushed. Someone just called into question your very worth as a human being, unconditional. Your ability, confident. Your character, peaceful. You're going to push back a little bit. They might even call it a little bit of your contribution. You can find in your own assessment, going to self-esteem, what buttons get pushed when someone else needs to be right and they make you wrong. Wow, that's how I feel. Yeah, now you can know exactly what it's triggering and why we push back, why we fight back to survive. Now, next piece and the last piece. How are we doing? We've got about 2 minutes. I'll make this quick because it can be. Go to empathy and intuition, Paul, connection with people. We have found that most independent thinking people have fairly high levels of empathy and intuition in this area. And empathy, EM, stand on someone's path. Correct intuitive input when they're dealing with a person. They get pretty accurate input. Challenge. Go back to self-esteem, if you would. This dialogue is so destructive and so loud that it's robbing them and everyone else who needs you to be intuitive of your greatest gift. The greatest gift we can have, we've saved it for last, is to be able to connect with another human being, care enough to step in their world, to be intuitively accurate in our assessment of that person, serve them at a very high level. And independent thinkers have this gifting almost all the time, 88% of the time. But 85% of the time, their self-esteem dialogue is so destructive that they'll get an intuitive idea, then they'll talk themselves out of their own idea, or they'll be so preoccupied by their doubt and fear and frustration, they may not even hear the intuitive idea. We want to uncover this one. You remember where we started this conversation? The number one cause of self-esteem challenges is an unmet expectation. Back to our first greatest gift. Learn how to use vivid visualization constructively to like passion, drive action. We create. We go, wow. You start to feel good about yourself. Karen's question about being present in the now, spending time with your natural genius. That's what happens after we procrastinate. We finally jump in and we go, wow, that was so hard. Yeah, because we shut off the noise and our natural genius showed up. When we're spending time getting those inspired ideas, we're spending time connecting with people, we begin to shut off this noise. And the more we shut off this noise and self-esteem, this self-sabotaging dialogue, the more available we are to serve. Loving ourselves is not about ego. It's about availability. Do you want to unlock your gift of empathy and intuition? Great place to start is with the very first gift we discussed, learning how to manage the vivid visionary. Okay, Paul, I think we got it.
Good. We did it. A lot of information. A lot of really valuable information. One of the risks that we run is actually coming back to the first strength that we talked about with a vivid visionary. Is one of its greatest gifts is to see possibilities, to see what we can create. And when we're using it intentionally and even sometimes unintentionally, what's happening in this metacognitive state that you referred to is the noise that has been holding us back from those possibilities quiets down. And we can see nothing but possibilities. And I know that there are a lot of people on here today that we've been able to quiet some of that noise just because you showed up, and the opportunity to be able to see possibilities, to see what could happen if I was able to harness vivid visualization and learn and master those 5 techniques for being able to harness that in a powerful way. What was possible if I could learn to harness this very active mind of mine to enhance and deepen relationships professionally and personally, and be able to finally unleash my empathy and intuition without allowing my self-sabotaging dialogue to talk me out of amazing things. Possibilities are what we're facing right now. But we would be doing you a disservice to tell you that this webinar has got you totally set up to take them on. We've exposed them, and that is not a small task. Those of you willing to put in this time today to really take a look at not just this webinar, but look at yourselves, you're on the right path. If you've faced them before and they've bested you, they continue to get that checkmate, then it may be time to consider some counter moves. Maybe time to learn to play this game a little bit differently. And maybe time to allow your intuition to be married with scientifically proven techniques and change the game for you, to change the outcome. The point of this webinar was to serve and to teach, and I hope that we did a good job of doing that today. And one of the reasons we're only going to take 30 seconds to say if you want to take this further is because it wasn't the point of this webinar. But if you're in that space, 2018 is the year, then we'd love to connect. Now, many of you are already engaged with us at a high level, and to you, thank you for showing up and always taking every opportunity that we can provide you to take it that much further. For those of you who haven't, you're going to get a really simple email from my team. My team, they are consultants, and their marching orders are to love and serve, period. And if any of you are considering wanting to explore this a little bit further, explore your habit finder results a little bit further, you can get 30, 45, 60 minutes plus of their time with their marching orders to love and serve. And then if it makes sense to consider other options, they'll present those to you, but not until they have thoroughly loved and served you and your objectives, your dreams, and your questions. And so please watch for that email. If you haven't put an @habitfinder.com on your safe list, watch for that in the next hour or so. You're going to get an email from each of you that have attended this webinar that aren't already coaching with us or engaged at a high level are going to be assigned to one of my consultants. And I can't stress again, their orders are to love and serve. So don't worry about getting some pressured call, some boiler room response or anything like that. They are made up of the same cloth as Dave and I. And they have a responsibility as consultants before coaches to explore things with you, to profile where you're at, and to serve you. And if that service lends itself to next steps, then they'll simply present those as an option. So please watch for that email and simply reply to it if you want to spend some time with my team. And that may lead to some time with us. And but regardless, thank you for being on today. It's such a pleasure for us to get to serve as often as we can in this capacity to large groups. To my father and business partner, thank you for being here today. Any last words from you?
I think everybody now knows why I love you so much.
Ditto. Awesome. All right. Thanks, everyone. That's it from here from us today. Love you all. Create a great day, a great week, a great year, and hope we get the opportunity to be a part of it at any level. Thank you.